All right, today we're going to look at our relationship with the divine, specifically our relationship with God, but how the word God interacts with our own traumas, our own belief systems, our own perceptions. This has come up a number of times in individual clearings I've done. It's come up in my own clearings. It's come up in conversations I've had with a lot of people. And I was trying to work through today what our clearing was going to be about. And it kept coming back to this like denying God, cursing God, hate of God. And so I want to look at just separating ourselves from the word God, but still applying the concept, right? The concept of like our own blocks now that we have to divinity, to our own divinity and the divinity of the world around us, the divinity of the universe, because we are so stuck on the literal meaning that we have all been gifted, because not all gifts are good, gifted by, our society, our culture, religion around capital G-O-D, big God, the big God in the sky. It was interesting last night. I did like a 2-hour-long clearing on myself, and a large period of that time was around this subject. I grew up, I think, as I've mentioned, in a very strict religious household, and come now as an adult to have appreciated that experience, but I'm still, as it turns out, carrying a lot of my own blocks to things in my life because of the way I am still perceiving morality, because of the way I'm still perceiving right and wrong, because of the way I'm still perceiving, this concept of good and bad. And I'm not denying that good and bad exist, but I do think that there is still something deeply embedded in all of us as it relates to the way that our perception of God is blocking us. Whether that is your perception of God because you love him so much and you're following him so much that is keeping you strictly inside of a dogma that isn't actually serving you. Maybe it's because you actually hate God now and you cannot have a relationship, a spiritual life whatsoever, because you have had to go so far away from this religious concept of God that now you have nothing and now you feel an emptiness there spiritually. So we're just going to look at this whole concept today of God and divinity and see what comes up. And I'm just going to start out by going to my first chart and just saying, what do you want to show us today as it relates to any blocks we might have around God, anything that might be holding us back? So I have a few options here. Down here at the bottom of my chart, things are kind of clustered. So I'm going to ask, is this chart 3, chart 8D, or chart 4? Chart 4. I don't know if you fully saw that full pendulum swing, but I felt it and I knew right where it was going. We're going to chart 4. Chart 4 can talk about programs we might be carrying, when something may have happened in our soul's evolutionary journey, past, present, future, parallel realm, whatever. And then also this kind of cast of characters are also present. And oftentimes this is reflective of a past life. But for today, we're just going to see what happens. So I'm going to go to this chart and I'm going to say, what is it that you want me to look at here that is kind of this root story of our dysfunctional relationship with God? And I have the program of fear coming up. So we are all still very much, not all, that's a lie. So what we're doing today for this particular collective is clearing any fear we are still carrying around God, that God is a figure to be feared, that we need to be fearful of, where our soul is going to wind up when this is all over. To release all of us from the fear of God that we've been carrying in this or any lifetime, from this or any parallel, from this or any reality. And when I say any reality, it's almost like the reality of the conscious mind, the reality of the subconscious, the reality because unconsciously we are experiencing this whole other reality. We're just not aware to it. So we're clearing it from all of those realities, from all of the realms of existence, from our sleeping realm, from our waking realm, from the realms we see, feel, hear, and understand, and those that we are disconnected to, because again, our awareness, our conscious mind is just not tapped into that space, but there is still something brewing there that we are connected to. And we clear fear of God from our force field, from our energy field. Ooh, and again, I know this is working when all of a sudden my whole body wants to melt. And she's just like, yes, Please clear fear of God from my force field, from my energy body. Is there anything else you want to show me on chart 4 as it relates to this dysfunctional relationship with God and divinity? No. So we're going to go back here and we're going to say what else would benefit us from clearing as it relates to this dysfunctional relationship with God, dysfunctional relationship with the divine. What do we need to know to help us get past this dysfunction and to bring harmony and balance back into our relationship with the divine? We're clearing all the hidden programs and issues at the 9,999 levels, again, in all depths, in all layers, in all directions, filling ourselves up, that whole, the journey, the evolution of our soul, the expansion of our consciousness. There's all these different levels of the expansion of consciousness, and this is just saying that there's a program happening there at this hidden level, this level that, again, we don't have conscious mind access to, but we can ask for it to be cleared, and we can just state with clear intent that anything that is hanging out there at that level of my consciousness expanding, I'm asking for it to go away, to be cleared, for there to be a direct path for my spirit and my soul to evolve, for my consciousness to evolve so that I can understand the divine better. Maybe me not understanding the divine fully, maybe me having a dysfunctional relationship with the divine is just a block at that level, and that's why we're blasting this away. What is there a wound, a specific wound related to this dysfunctional relationship with God? Yeah, and that was one thing that I was encouraged to start looking at more in my clearings. Last night when I was doing my clearings, I got kind of a message that was just like, you got to be looking at the wound. Look at the wound here. Ask what we can do to heal the wound. What is the wound? Where did the wound come from? What function is it serving? Like, what's the benefit? And then what do we need to do to release it? So what is the wound here as it relates to God? Our mystic archetype has just been smushed down, right? I don't know if any of you who grew up in the church remember that song, This Little Light of Mine, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. That one, it's like hiding under a bushel. No, I'm gonna let it shine. And that's what for some reason, that song just popped into my head as I was doing this. It's like, you don't have to hide your mystic under a bushel anymore. Let your mystic shine. And you have this wound around feeling like you need that mystical side of you to, exist. You want it to exist, but you're afraid of it existing. There's past lives are current lives. Let's just talk about current life, but also make note that this is past life stuff too, where it wasn't okay for you to be mystical because only God was mystical. Only God had magic powers. Only God was able to heal the sick or bring someone back from the dead. And if you even considered that you might be someone who can do something like that, it was hearsay, it was idolatry, it was, it was a death sentence, it was blasphemy, it was all the things, right? It was like, think of every bad thing you could say. It's like, no, that is like sinning to the nth degree. That's like the worst sin you could possibly make, is comparing yourself to God, which is crazy because it was like, we're made in his image. And, I feel like, at least in the Christian Bible, the whole story is like Jesus came back to say, do as I do. You can do this too. We are all a part of the collective divinity. You have access to the divine. I am here as a representation in human form to show you that you have access to the divine. But we feel guilty. We don't understand that. It doesn't resonate with the Old Testament version of the Bible of Christianity, which was like, no, you cannot possibly even think for 1 second that you have access to divinity or that divinity can move through you and flow through you. Maybe if you were a special kind of a prophet, but only if you were anointed as a special kind of a prophet. So, we're releasing all of us from the lie, from this long-standing thousands and thousands of year old lie that we are not a part of the divine, that we don't have access to the divine, that we can't allow our mysticism to shine. Again, softening ourselves into this new belief, calling our awareness onto the new belief, this refreshed, reformed belief that the divine loves me, the divine wants to flow through me, and it is safe to be a mystic. It is safe to own my identity as a mystic. It is safe for me to believe in the mystical. Even if I don't feel like I can identify as a mystic, at least I can believe in mysticism. Mysticism beyond what is explained in any religious text, a mysticism that, you know, just touches us at our core on a very natural level, on a very like animal level, beyond understanding, beyond conscious awareness. Healing all of our mystic archetypes now. And what would it mean for you to be able to fully lean into your mystic archetype? So let's see, we looked at the wound, right? The wound is, I don't get to be the mystic archetype that I want to be that would benefit me. And so what do we need to do to clear us? Is there anything else other than what I just said that can help clear us of this wound? Was this check over soul and soul family or chart 21? Chart 21, okay. So we're going to go to chart 21 and we're going to see what we need to do here to help clear this wound any more than it's already been cleared just by what I just had. So we're asking to raise the soul and committees to the highest level on chart 3. Chart 3, again, is that like soul expansion chart. It's where we go from, you know, like the muck of our original spark of life through the experience of being human and all of these things, through all the different layers of consciousness expanding, of awareness expanding, until we go back to source, until we go back to light. And this is basically just saying, raise our consciousness to the highest level it could possibly go to in that process, in that expansion. And that's what's going to help heal this wound. Because again, when we're hanging out down here in this low level consciousness, we believe in the wound. We've bought the lie. We've bought the belief that we are disconnected from the divine, that God is something to be feared, that the divine is something to be feared, that even though we are divine, we should hide it. We should put it under the bushel. We should pretend like that's not really who we are. But when we are in our, you know, fully evolved, conscious, you know, selves, fully aware, when we are in full awareness of the breadth and the depth of who we are, then we don't have to struggle with that wound anymore. That wound is healed through expansion of consciousness, through expansion of the mind, through expansion of the heart, through expansion of the soul. Just through expansion is how that wound is healed. And I hope that that makes sense to some people who maybe have had pains or traumas or wounds that they've had in the past that were healed through, you know, having the mind understand it, by having some awareness brought to that wound, by having some understanding brought to that wound. You know, when we don't understand why someone has hurt us, when we don't understand the root story, when we don't understand our own response to it, our own reaction to it, whatever the case may be, it's that much more painful and it's that much harder to heal from it, right? It's almost like, you know, receiving a diagnosis at the doctor. If you have a symptom over and over and over again, you can't figure out why you have these stomach issues over and over and over again. Really hard to clear a stomach issue if you don't have awareness of what is causing the stomach issue. But you get the right test, you get the right diagnostics, you find out you have this infection, you get treated for the infection, and lo and behold, all of a sudden, through the awareness of the diagnosis, through the awareness of what has been causing the issue and the pain, you can then treat and heal that issue or that concern. And so that's kind of what we're doing here with SRT. We're shining a diagnostic light onto the wound, figuring out the root of the wound, where did it come from, helping us to understand the wound, helping us to understand, like, okay, yeah, I have a wound around God, but why do I have a wound around God? Oh, it's because I want to identify, I feel deep in my heart that I'm a mystical being, but I feel blocked to that because I'm afraid that according to my religious programming, that is wrong, that is bad, that is sinful. And so I've had to block that side of myself, which creates deep pain and deep disconnection because I want to connect to God. I don't want to hate God. I don't want to curse God. I don't want to deny God. I want to be connected to source. I want to be connected to spirit. I want to have a spiritual experience in this life, but I want to have one that isn't tainted, that isn't just a festering wound. So that is why we're calling all of our awareness into the truth, into the light, into expansion, into true understanding of our connection to the divine, and to, the truth of the story, which is Jesus was a symbolic representation of, God's love for us. God saying, you are now directly connected to me. The disconnect that used to exist between humanity and the divine is gone. Jesus was the portal between humanity and the divine, symbolically, okay? It's like, that's what these prophets represent. These prophets, whether it's Jesus or whoever, represent the connection to the divine, and they are your access points. So if you want to get there, if you want to be there, you can utilize any of the symbols. And that's why I'm not against any religious symbol. Use whatever religious symbol you want to use, as long as it helps you feel connected to the divine. Should you then also buy into all of the dogma and all of the, moral punishing? No, I don't think you should. But I also don't think there's anything wrong with finding a symbolic entity that you connect with, that helps you feel that you are a part of the divine. It helps you feel more connected. And you can say that right now. It's okay to be connected to the divine. I see, hear, and feel how I am truly part of the divine. That we are all conduits of divine energy, of divine spark, of divine magic. We are all conduits of that. We are all, and I always like to talk about the jellyfish, right? There's the big jellyfish body, and you can imagine that that is God, right? The head of the jellyfish is God, is the divine, is source. And then we are all just tentacles. We're connected to it. We're individual tentacles, however many trillion bajillion of us across time and space that have existed. Our souls, our spirits, we're hanging off of that giant jellyfish body, but we are all connected. We all are a part of it. And at a certain point, your little individual experience will, shrivel up and go back up to the body. And then maybe it'll pop back down again in another lifetime as this, and then come back as another tentacle, and then come back as another tentacle. And you'll just come in and out as different tentacles off of the divine, massive body. That's how I like to see it. I hope that that is helpful for you in some way. Imagery is great. Symbolism is great. Humans have been relying upon symbolism since the dawn of their species. Okay, anything else you need me to do here as it relates to this wound around being connected to God, connected to the divine? Higher level blocks, chart 18. What is going on with these higher level blocks? We release the belief that all pain and suffering is real and necessary, and that is part of the problem, right? It's like this original sin belief, this Adam and Eve belief, this heaven and hell belief. Well, if there is God, there must be heaven and hell. There must be suffering. If there is God, it must mean that there are these things that are right and these things that are wrong. And there is just this demand for us to have this disconnection. And in that disconnection, we have this suffering. And we have the potential for even more suffering, right? It's like that is the threat of hell, the threat of death is the threat of suffering, and believing that there is this real and necessary suffering that is going to happen at the end for all of us. And although we do have to experience suffering in this lifetime, I don't personally believe that we have to experience a death and an end that is suffering and blackness and bleakness and damnation. If you would like, you can say one more time. I release the belief that all pain and suffering is real and necessary. All right, back we go. What else can we do today? How can we, once and for all, at least for today, release a little bit more of this fear, of this dysfunctional relationship we're having with God and with the divine, dysfunction of thought. Dysfunction of thought, anything in particular that is going on with this dysfunction of thought that will help us understand this a little bit better. 6A or 6E? 6A, dysfunction of thought as it relates to what? Dysfunction of thought as it relates to what? How are our thoughts dysfunctional? So I'm seeing, is this spiritual suicide or is this health abuse? Spiritual suicide. This came up in a clearing really recently. And, you know, it really is about killing ourselves spiritually because we do feel disconnected from source. We don't understand the journey of the soul. We don't understand the purpose of us being here. We don't get it. We feel lost. We feel confused. And so we kill off that part of ourselves. And again, to me, this also says the dysfunction of thought we're having is, again, I believe that God is big, scary, fearful, or just stupid and not real. I don't believe in divinity, or I believe that divinity is all about pain and suffering. And so again, I'm going to kill off my spiritual nature. I'm going to kill off the mystic in me. I'm going to kill off that part of me that wants to connect to divine light and source, but can't because I'm so heavily programmed or heavily wounded by the fear and by the guilt and the shame and this belief that we're just, you know, here to suffer as spiritual beings. Yeah, disavowing, you know, contracts to spiritual suicide, disavowing agreements to commit spiritual suicide, disavowing ourselves from anything or anyone at any time, in any place, in any reality that had convinced us that we needed to kill ourselves spiritually, that we needed to kill off our connection to spirit. Let out a good exhale with that one. All right. Anything else we can do here today as it relates to this clearing? Is this a no, or was there a chart you wanted me to look at? Okay, so which of those charts you wanted me to look at? 8A, that's what I thought. Just wanted to check because it kind of looked like a no, but we're going to go back to chart 8A. This is about our archetypes. So what other archetype here is functioning that needs to be restored and released? Our inner child, and it's related to feeling victimized and abandoned. You know, maybe we feel abandoned by God. We feel victimized by God. We feel abandoned by the church. We feel victimized by the church. And so that is blocking us to our divinity, blocking us to being the mystics that we really can be. And we need to heal that inner child in all of us that feels abandoned by spirituality, that feels abandoned or victimized by God and the church. So what is a wound here? What is an additional wound here? A specific wound, something specifically that can get cleared. Is this 6D or 6A? 6D. So what is the specific wound around this that we can call out and clear? Yeah, and it all comes down to feeling separated by God, separated from God, I should say, and maybe by God as well. But, you know, that wound is like, when I dropped into this human form, I was completely connected to my own divinity. And you see it all the time in children. You meet any 2 or 3-year-old and you know that they are connected to their divinity. It's not even a question. And once we are exposed to the dogma of church and religion and the morality of God or whatever religious figure you come from, suddenly we feel separated from our divinity. And it's very painful. I remember this very specifically, experiencing this as a child, where I felt very much at a very young age that I could see and feel God in a very deep way. But then it was almost like I was told, oh no, you can't. That's only for the prophets. That's only for people who've been baptized in the Holy Spirit. You can't actually, connect to God in that way. You can't speak God's language in that way. You haven't been selected. You haven't been chosen. You have to struggle first to get there. You have to jump through the hoops to get there. You have these hurdles to getting to the closeness with God that you're claiming you have. How dare you claim you have that closeness to God? And you're like, WTF, like, I can hear the flowers talking, and I can, I can sense things on a very deep level, and I feel very close to God. I feel God's energy moving through me all the time. And then you feel crazy. And then you have dysfunction of thought. That came up earlier, right? Then you feel crazy. You have dysfunction of thought because something that you believe to be true, something that you knew to be true, not just a belief, you know it to be true. All of a sudden, there's grown-ups, people who you believe in, people who you trust telling you, no, you're crazy. You don't feel that connection to God. You don't actually feel that. You can't feel that. You are not as divine as you think you are. You are flawed. You are human. And then you have to work to be divine. Then you have to achieve divinity. I want you to say that with me right now. I do not have to achieve divinity. I am inherently divine. Yeah, that's a painful one. That's a painful one. And it blocks us to our magic. It blocks us to our power. It blocks us to all of our abilities. It blocks us to our sight. It blocks us to our inner knowing. It blocks us to our healing abilities. Oh, it's so sad. It makes me so, so, so sad. And there's people inside the church who experience this block and outside the church who experience this block. And it could be that these things were told to you through religion and through the church, but these could also be things that were told to you outside of that space. It could be that you were just a very creative little kid and somebody made you feel stupid and bad for that creative life force that was moving through you, and they stifled it. It could be that you were a little kid that had this amazing natural healing ability with animals, but somebody at a certain point doubted you and fed you this belief that that was for the grown-ups, that that was for those who were trained, that was for those who knew what they were doing. You don't know what you're doing. And it disconnected us from all of our own gifts. We all have divine and natural gifts that do not come through school and education, that do not come through age and experience. They are divine gifts that we were all dropped into this planet with. But we're disconnected from them because we have this wound, because we've been told this lie, because we've been blocked, because we are just wounded inner children that have been victimized by the story that we are not divine, that we are disconnected from the divine. So we're releasing all of us from that lie and that story now. Whew. Anything else we can do in this clearing today? Anything else we can do in this clearing today? We're going to clear a few more icky energies out of the way. I have a feeling there's a couple icky energies here that continue to need cleared, and then I'm just going to call in some new replacement energies. Betrayal. Yeah, the feeling of being betrayed. Betrayed by God, betrayed by our family, betrayed by the church. The energy of vengefulness. Yeah, who has been vengeful against you? And have you felt vengeful against the church, against God, against religion? The energy of feeling forsaken. We have absolutely felt forsaken by God, but I thought you said that I was your child. I thought that I was special. Ooh, the feeling of separation, the feeling of doom and domineering. Separation, doom, domineering, forsaken. Releasing ourselves of these energies, and in its place we're calling in what new energies are we calling in the place of all of these things? We're calling in the energy of forgiveness, forgiving ourselves, forgiving our family, forgiving the church, forgiving God for these misperceptions, miscommunications, for these wounds. Health, we're calling in the energy of health, we're calling in the energy of understanding. All right, everybody. This is an interesting one today. I hope that you found that helpful in some way. If you want to learn more, you can reach out to me at www.thepointedstone.com. Let's all take one more good exhale together, softening into this present moment, opening ourselves up to accepting this healing, believing that this healing can take place, believing that we are divine, believing that we are mystical, believing that God loves us, cares about us, and that we have a direct line to the divine, and we can share it in the way that we are gifted to share it. All right. Thanks for being here, and we will see you next time on another episode of Clearing with Kate.